The bank statement looked normal, just numbers on paper. But when Anna Schmidt walked into her Berlin bakery on November 15, 1923, those numbers meant absolutely nothing. The 80,000 marks in her savings account, her entire life's work from 12 years of pre-dawn baking, couldn't buy a single loaf of the bread she'd spent her life perfecting. Not because the bank had failed, not because someone had stolen her money, but because in just 18 months, the German mark had collapsed so catastrophically that by that morning, her life savings could barely purchase a postage stamp. She stood there, statement trembling in her flour-dusted hands, and understood a truth that millions would learn too late. Your money doesn't disappear slowly when hyperinflation strikes. It evaporates while you're still trusting the system. Most people think inflation is prices slowly rising. An annoyance maybe, but manageable. You've probably noticed your groceries costing more, your rent creeping upward. But what happens when inflation doesn't creep? What happens when it sprints, then runs, then becomes an unstoppable avalanche? When your savings don't lose 3% or even 10% of their value, but 99.9%. When the life you've carefully built, the retirement you've meticulously planned, the security you've painstakingly saved for, when all of it becomes worthless not over decades but over months, weeks, or even days. This isn't theoretical fear-mongering. It's documented history, and it's happened more recently than you think. Today we're pulling back the curtain on hyperinflation, the silent wealth destroyer that's ravaged multiple nations in just the past 15 years. You'll see exactly what happens to your savings when inflation hits 1,000%. More importantly, you'll discover what the survivors did differently, and why what you think protects wealth might actually be the first thing to crumble. Let's step back to understand how hyperinflation actually works, because the mechanism is disturbingly simple. Picture your national currency as shares in a company, your country. When the government prints more currency without producing more actual goods and services, it's like a company issuing millions of new shares without growing the business. Each existing share, each dollar mark or bolivar you hold, becomes worth proportionally less. The mathematics are brutal. If the money supply doubles but economic output stays the same, your purchasing power is cut in half. Now imagine that happening not once but continuously, exponentially, until the currency itself becomes worthless. Germany's 1923 hyperinflation remains the textbook case, and the details are staggering. In January 1919, $1 equaled 8.9 German marks. By November 1923, that same dollar bought 4.2 trillion marks. Read that again, trillion with a T. The government, desperate to pay First World War reparations and war debts, simply printed money. Lots of it. Workers demanded to be paid twice daily because their morning wages would lose half their value by evening. People used wheelbarrows, not to carry purchases but to transport the cash needed to buy them. Children built block towers from bundles of worthless banknotes. But here's what the history books often skip. Who lost everything and who didn't? Anna Schmidt, our baker, represented millions of middle-class Germans who kept their wealth in savings accounts, bonds and pensions, all denominated in marks. They played by the rules, trusted the system, and were financially destroyed. Meanwhile, a factory owner named Fritz Thyssen, who had borrowed heavily to buy steel plants and industrial equipment, emerged from hyperinflation essentially debt-free. His loans, denominated in marks, became worthless, but his factories, real tangible assets, retained their value. Debt that had represented years of future earnings could be repaid with money that couldn't buy a newspaper. This pattern repeated with horrifying consistency. Zimbabwe in 2008 reached the second highest inflation rate ever recorded, 79.6 billion%, month over month at its peak in November. A teacher named Tsitsi Madzivire watched her monthly salary of 10 billion Zimbabwean dollars, which had briefly seemed like a fortune, become incapable of buying a single egg by the time she could withdraw it. The Zimbabwe government eventually printed a $100 trillion note. It was worth approximately $30 when issued. Then weeks later, nothing. Those who kept savings in bank accounts lost everything. Those who had immediately converted earnings into US dollars, South African rand or tangible goods preserved their wealth. More recently, Venezuela's hyperinflation that began around 2016 destroyed an entire generation's retirement savings. The Bolivar lost 99.9% of its value between 2013 and 2021. Maria Fernandez, a retired teacher, saw her pension that had once covered a comfortable lifestyle become insufficient to buy a kilogram of rice. Her neighbor, who had skeptically converted savings into physical property and foreign currency against official government advice, maintained his standard of living. The difference: understanding what actually holds value when the currency system collapses. Now let's walk through exactly what happens to your specific savings when hyperinflation takes hold, because the destruction follows a predictable pattern that most people fail to recognize until it's too late. Stage 1 feels almost normal. Inflation rises from 3% to 8%, then 15%. Economists debate. Politicians promise it's transitory. You notice prices rising, but tell yourself it's temporary. Your savings account still shows the same numbers. This is the critical window where action can save you, but it's also when normalcy bias is strongest. After all, your bank balance hasn't changed. The number looks the same. Stage 2 is where the velocity accelerates. Inflation hits 50%, then 100% annually. Now you're actively watching prices. That car you were considering buying, it's 30% more expensive than 3 months ago. Your salary increase of 10% feels insulting because your groceries cost 60% more. But here's the psychological trap. You think you still have time. Your savings are losing value, yes, but slowly enough that you believe you can wait, plan, make careful decisions. This is exactly when Anna Schmidt hesitated in 1923 Germany. She saw prices rising but thought, the government will fix this. Banks are safe. I shouldn't panic. By the time she decided to act, it was over. Stage 3 is the collapse. Inflation crosses 1,000%, then 10,000%. The numbers become absurd. In Zimbabwe, prices doubled every 24.7 hours at the peak. Imagine, you go to sleep with enough money for a month of groceries. You wake up and it covers 2 weeks. By dinner, it's 1 week. By the next morning, it's 3 days. Your savings account, whether it held 50,000 or 500,000, becomes irrelevant. The purchasing power approaches zero regardless of the nominal amount. Chitsi Madzivire, our Zimbabwean teacher, described checking her bank account and seeing billions of dollars, yet being unable to afford transportation to work. The number was meaningless. Stage 4 is the most devastating, the permanent wealth transfer. This is what history books sanitize, but it's crucial to understand. Your savings don't just disappear into thin air. The purchasing power transfers to those who positioned themselves correctly. In every hyperinflationary episode, a small percentage of the population not only survives but thrives. In Weimar Germany, industrialists like Hugo Stinnes built massive empires by acquiring distressed assets with devalued currency. In Zimbabwe, those with access to foreign currency bought property and businesses from desperate sellers for pennies on the dollar. In Venezuela, connected elites with government access to US dollars purchased decades of middle-class wealth accumulation at catastrophic discounts. The pattern is consistent and cruel. Savers who trusted the system lose everything. Those holding cash see it become worthless. Bank accounts, bonds, pensions, insurance policies, anything denominated in the collapsing currency evaporate. Meanwhile, those holding real assets, foreign currency or commodities with intrinsic value, preserve and often multiply their wealth. The crisis doesn't destroy wealth. It rapidly redistributes it from the unprepared to the positioned. If you're thinking that's history, it can't happen to developed economies today, Consider what's unfolding right now. We're not in hyperinflation yet, but the conditions are disturbingly familiar. Since 2008, global central banks have printed more money than in all previous history combined. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded from $870 billion in 2007 to over $8.5 trillion by 2022, nearly a tenfold increase. The European Central Bank, Bank of Japan and Bank of England followed similar paths. This is quantitative easing, a technical term for what is fundamentally money printing. COVID-19 accelerated this exponentially. In just 2020-2021, the US government injected approximately $5 trillion into the economy through stimulus programs. The M2 money supply, the total amount of money circulating, increased by 26% in a single year, the largest peacetime expansion in modern history. And the result? Inflation that hit 9.1% in June 2022, the highest in 40 years. Your savings lost nearly 10% of their purchasing power in 12 months. Not hyperinflation, certainly, but a preview of how quickly currency devaluation can accelerate. Then came March 2023, and the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, followed quickly by Signature Bank and First Republic Bank, the second, third and fourth largest bank failures in US history. All within weeks. Depositors who had kept millions in accounts suddenly faced uncertainty about access to their own money. The government intervened, but the message was clear. Your savings in the banking system are only as secure as confidence in that system. When confidence cracks, everything moves fast. Globally, the picture is more concerning. Turkey's inflation hit 85% in October 2022. Argentina's exceeded 100% in 2023, with the peso losing over 90% of its value against the dollar in just 3 years. Lebanon's currency collapsed by 98% between 2019 and 2023, destroying the savings of an entire middle class virtually overnight. These aren't failed states. They're countries with educated populations, functioning governments, and banking systems that looked stable until they weren't. The mechanism is identical to historical episodes. Governments spending beyond their means, central banks printing to cover deficits, currency losing purchasing power, savings evaporating. The only question is velocity. Will developed economies experience a slow erosion of 3 to 5% annually? Or could current policies trigger acceleration? History suggests that once inflation momentum builds, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to control without severe economic pain. And during that transition, savings held in currency are always the first casualty. So what do you actually do with this information? Because understanding the problem without actionable solutions leaves you exactly where you started. Here are 3 concrete steps based on what actually worked for hyperinflation survivors, adapted for today's environment. Action. Step 1. Diversify beyond currency immediately. Stop thinking of your savings as just a number in a bank account. Start thinking in terms of purchasing power preservation. This means holding assets that maintain value independent of currency fluctuations. Historically, this meant physical assets, real estate, precious metals, commodities, productive equipment. Today you have more options. Allocate a portion of savings to physical gold or silver, not as a speculation, but as a currency hedge. Consider international diversification by holding some savings in multiple currencies, particularly those with stronger fiscal discipline. Look at assets with intrinsic utility, tools, equipment, skills training that increases your earning power regardless of economic conditions. The goal isn't to get rich, it's to not get poor when currency devalues. Action step 2. Eliminate variable rate debt, consider fixed rate strategic borrowing. This sounds counterintuitive, but understand the mechanism. Inflation destroys the value of currency-denominated debts, just as it destroys currency-denominated savings. In hyperinflation, fixed-rate borrowers benefit enormously as their debt becomes worthless in real terms. However, this only works with fixed-rate debt secured against real assets. Think fixed-rate mortgages on property, not credit card debt. The critical distinction: eliminate any variable rate or demand callable debt immediately, as rates will skyrocket with inflation. But if you can lock in long-term fixed-rate borrowing at today's rates to acquire productive assets, you're positioning yourself like those German industrialists who emerged from hyperinflation, debt-free action. Step 3. Build income streams in multiple currencies or asset types. Your salary or business revenue is a currency-denominated income stream. If that currency devalues, your income devalues with it. Create alternative streams: rental income from property, digital products or services you can price in multiple currencies, skills that are compensated internationally. The Venezuelans and Zimbabweans who survived best were those who could earn in dollars, pounds, or euros while living in a devaluing economy. In a globalized world, this is more accessible than ever. Remote work, international clients, digital services. Diversified income streams are inflation insurance. These aren't panic moves, they're rational responses to observable monetary expansion. The question isn't whether your savings will lose value to inflation. It's how much and how fast. Position accordingly.